He walked into the luxury car dealership wearing simple clothes and muddy boots. The salespeople laughed, asking if he planned to pay with milk and eggs. But when he revealed who he really was and why he was buying, everyone cried. It was a Monday morning when John Silva parked his old Ford pickup in front of the most luxurious Mercedes-Benz dealership in Dallas. The contrast was striking. Million-dollar cars gleamed under the spotlights while his 1998 pickup looked like a dinosaur among spaceships. He climbed out slowly, adjusted his faded straw hat, and looked at the glass building that rose before him like a modern temple. John was 62 years old, with hands calloused from a lifetime of working the land, and that simple manner of someone who never needed to pretend to be what he wasn't. He wore a faded plaid shirt, jeans with patches at the knees, and leather boots that had stepped in more mud than most people see in their entire lives. In his shirt pocket, a bundle of folded and crumpled papers that he guarded like treasure. When he pushed through the glass door of the dealership, the ice-cold air conditioning hit his face like a slap. The environment was intimidating even for someone who didn't intimidate easily. Marble floors so polished they reflected like mirrors. Classical music playing softly through invisible speakers, and that smell of new car mixed with Italian leather that cost more than minimum wage. Three salespeople were talking near a black Mercedes S-Class that was worth more than a house in rural Texas. When they saw John entering, the first looked at the second looked at the third, and all three looked at John as if he had entered the wrong place. The silence was so heavy that even the classical music seemed to have stopped playing. "Good morning," John said with that deep voice of someone who's never in a hurry and afraid of nothing. "I'd like to speak with someone about trucks." Richard Mendez, the sales manager, was a 40-year-old man who wore a suit more expensive than most Americans' cars. Slicked back hair, Swiss watch on his wrist, and that fake smile that sold more through arrogance than sympathy. He gave a low chuckle and whispered something to Patricia, the saleswoman beside him, who immediately covered her mouth to keep from laughing too loudly. "Trucks." Richard repeated the word as if John had spoken in Chinese. "Sir, are you sure you're in the right place? This is Mercedes-Benz, not a junkyard." The joke drew laughter from the other salespeople. John didn't flinch. He had heard worse in life, and from people much worse than those. He simply adjusted his hat and repeated with the same calm, "Mercedes trucks. I want to buy 15 units." Now the laughter was general. Patricia leaned toward Richard and whispered loud enough for John to hear. He must be confusing this with a toy store. 15 trucks at once. Or maybe, Richard completed, looking John up and down with barely disguised disgust, he thinks he can pay with milk and chicken eggs, like back in the countryside. The laughter that exploded in the dealership was so loud that even customers on the other side of the showroom turned to see what was happening. John felt his face heat up, not from shame, but from a controlled anger that came from years of seeing small people think they're big because they wear expensive clothes. "Can I see the trucks?" he insisted, keeping his voice firm. "I have money to pay cash." "Cash?" Richard almost choked from laughing so hard. "Sir, do you know how much a Mercedes truck costs? It's not an ox cart, you know." "I know exactly how much it costs," John replied, taking the crumpled papers from his pocket. "That's why I'm here. I need 15 units of the most top-of-the-line model you have." Richard didn't even look at the papers, made a dismissive gesture with his hand, and turned to Patricia. "Patricia, call the used car dealership down the street. They might have something more suitable for this gentleman here." "Richard," John said, and there was something in his tone that made the manager stop laughing. "I didn't come here to buy used cars. I came to buy 15 brand new Mercedes trucks, 0 miles, with all the technology you have available." "And how are you going to pay?" Patricia asked with irony. "With soybeans? With corn? Are you going to bring the cows here to barter?" John took a deep breath. He knew this moment would come. It always came. People who judged by appearances, who measured people's worth by the price of their clothes, who confused poverty with simplicity and simplicity with ignorance. "I'm going to pay cash," he repeated, now looking directly into Richard's eyes. "Bank transfer, clean money, honestly earned from my land." "Your land?" Richard laughed once more. "What land, sir?" "A 5-acre ranch lost in the middle of nowhere." 12 farms, John replied simply. "In 4 different states. 50,000 acres of soybeans, corn, and cotton. I export to China, Europe, and the United States." Richard's laughter became a bit more forced. Something about John's certainty was beginning to bother him, but arrogance spoke louder. "Look, sir," Richard began. John Silva. "Mr. John, look, I understand that everyone has dreams, okay? But this isn't a place for games. These trucks cost more than $500,000 each. 15 trucks would be more than $7 million. Do you understand that amount?" "I understand perfectly," John said, unfolding one of the papers he took from his pocket. "And I know that 15 Mercedes Actros 2551 6x4 with complete implements cost exactly $7,450,000. I've already researched the prices." Richard stopped laughing. The number was right, too exact to be a guess from someone who didn't understand the business. But wounded pride wouldn't let him admit he might have judged wrong. "Researched where?" "On the internet," he mocked. "Anyone can go on the website and see prices, but paying is another story." "Can I speak with the dealership owner?" John asked, putting the papers back in his pocket. "Dr. Fernando doesn't see just anyone who walks in here," Richard replied with disdain. "He only receives VIP clients, important people, real businessmen." "Then schedule a meeting." "Can I wait?" "Wait," Patricia interjected. "Sir, Dr. Fernando schedules in advance. That's not how it works. You can't just walk in here and demand to be seen." "I'm not demanding," John said calmly. "I'm asking, and I can wait as long as necessary." Richard looked at Patricia. Patricia looked at the other salespeople, and everyone looked at John as if he were a problem they didn't know how to solve. They had important clients arriving. The dealership had a reputation to maintain, and that simple man was disrupting the sophisticated environment they cultivated. "Mr. John," Richard tried one last time. "Why don't you go home, organize that paperwork properly, and come back another day? Maybe to a dealership more suitable for your profile?" John looked around. He saw the luxury cars, the suited salespeople, the well-dressed clients who were beginning to arrive for the morning rush. But he also saw something they couldn't see. He saw people who confused price with value, who believed expensive clothes made important people. "I'll sit over there and wait," he said, pointing to the leather armchairs in the reception area. "When Dr. Fernando arrives, I'd like to speak with him." And that's exactly what he did. He sat in the armchair, took off his hat, placed it on his lap, and stayed there quietly, with the patience of someone who had spent his life planting seeds and waiting for them to grow. Richard became nervous. Patricia became embarrassed. The other salespeople began whispering among themselves. Important clients were arriving, and that simple farmer was causing discomfort that no one knew how to resolve. But John didn't care. He had come there with a purpose, a mission worth much more than $7 million, a promise he had made and intended to keep, whatever the cost. And while he waited, he observed. He observed how those people treated each other, how they judged by appearance, how they confused success with character. In a few hours, all of them would learn a lesson they would never forget. The lesson that appearances deceive and that a person's true worth isn't measured by the price of the clothes they wear. An hour passed. John remained there motionless as stone, with his hat on his lap and eyes fixed on nothing. Richard could no longer disguise his irritation. That man was completely ruining the dealership's atmosphere. Important clients entered, saw that displaced figure in the leather armchair, and made disgusted faces. "Patricia," Richard whispered, pulling the saleswoman to a corner. "This can't continue. The guy looks like a homeless person begging for change." "I know," she replied, looking at John with contempt. "I've thought of everything. He must have escaped from somewhere. People like that have no notion of where they can and can't enter. We need to get rid of him before someone more important arrives." At that moment, the glass door opened and Margaret Fonseca entered, wife of a state senator, all made up, with a purse that cost more than an economy car. She stopped at the entrance, saw John sitting in the armchair, and her expression changed immediately. "What situation is this?" she asked loudly, pointing at John as if he were a strange animal. "Since when has this dealership become a shelter?" Richard ran to her, trying to control the damage. "Mrs. Margaret, 1,000 apologies. We're already resolving the situation." "Resolving how? How long has the man been sitting there?" "Not long, ma'am. We'll remove him right now." Margaret looked John up and down with barely disguised disgust. "Look, Richard, I don't usually frequent places that receive any type of people. My husband is a public figure. Our image cannot be associated with this." John heard every word, felt every judgmental look, but remained there firm, remembering his daughter's words. "Daddy, you're the bravest man in the world." If she could see now, what would she think? Seeing her father being treated as if he were nothing. "Sir." Richard approached John, this time with a more threatening tone. "The situation has changed. There are important people here. You're going to have to leave." John raised his eyes slowly. "I'm no less important than anyone." "Of course you are," Patricia interjected, now without disguising her contempt. "Look how you're dressed. Look where you are. Do you really think you belong in this place?" "I belong here as much as any person who wants to buy a car." Margaret let out a dry laugh. "Buy? With what money?" "With corn." The joke drew laughter from everyone around. John felt his chest tighten, not from humiliation, but because he remembered his daughter asking, "Daddy, why are people mean to those who don't have nice clothes?" "They're not mean, my daughter," he had replied. "They're small inside." "Sir," Richard continued, "I'll be direct. You're bothering our clients. You're hurting our business. Either you leave willingly, or I'll call security." John took from his pocket those crumpled papers, bank statements, farm documents, export receipts. "Can I show that I have the means to buy?" Richard didn't even look. Anyone can fake papers. Nowadays, even children make fake documents on computers. These documents are real. "Real?" Patricia laughed. "Just like your 15 trucks. 15 trucks. Margaret became interested for the first time. "What are you talking about?" Richard sighed, embarrassed. "Mrs. Margaret, this gentleman here arrived saying he wants to buy 15 Mercedes trucks." Margaret's laughter was so loud it echoed throughout the entire dealership. 15 trucks. Does he know how much that costs? "More than $7 million, John said calmly. "He even memorized the amount," Patricia shouted between laughs. "Must have researched on the internet." "Internet that he doesn't even know how to use properly," Richard completed. "People like that think Google is an oracle." John felt something burning inside. A muffled, controlled anger, but one that grew with each word. He remembered his daughter in the hospital, weak, but still dreaming. "Daddy, when I get better, we're going to build a hospital for the little children who don't have money." "We will, my princess. We'll help all of them." Now he was there trying to fulfill that promise and being treated like a madman. "Can I at least explain what I need the trucks for?" John tried one last time. "For what?" Richard asked with irony. "To carry potatoes from your farm? To transport soybeans for export. My annual production is 500,000 tons. The silence that fell was heavy. 500,000 tons wasn't a joke. It was serious production from a big farmer. But Richard had gone too far to back down. 500,000 tons, he repeated with sarcasm. "Of course. And I'm the owner of Mercedes in America." "You don't understand," John said, his voice coming out thicker. "I didn't come here to play games. I came to fulfill a promise." "What promise?" John hesitated. He didn't want to talk about his daughter to those people. They didn't deserve to know the most sacred story of his life. "An important promise." "Important to whom?" Patricia mocked. "To your chickens?" This time John stood up. Not because he was leaving, but because anger was rising. A controlled anger, but one that was beginning to boil. "Be careful what you say." "Or what?" Richard approached, trying to intimidate. "What are you going to do? Call your bulls to help you?" "I'm not going to do anything," John replied. But there was something in his tone that made Richard take a step back. "I'm just going to stay here until I'm properly attended to." Margaret was enjoying the show. "Richard, just call security. We can't waste time with people like this." "People like what?" John asked, looking directly at her. "People who don't know their place. My place is wherever I want to be, especially when I have money to pay." "What money?" she laughed. "Real money or monopoly money?" John sat back down. He breathed deeply, trying to control the emotion that was taking over. He remembered a Sunday morning when he took his daughter to see the farm. She was enchanted with the trucks loaded with soybeans. "Daddy, where does all this soy go?" "To other countries, my daughter. To feed people all over the world." "Wow. So you help feed the world." "I do, princess. When I grow up, I want to help too, but I want to help the sick little children." That's what it was about. Not trucks, not money. It was about an 8-year-old girl who dreamed of saving other children like her. "Sir," Richard returned to the attack. "Enough. Enough of this circus. Either you leave now, or I'll really call security." "Go ahead and call them." "Call what? Are you crazy?" "I'm not crazy. I'm determined." Patricia whispered something to another salesperson who ran off, probably to really call security. John saw, but didn't care. He had faced worse things in life. He had spent nights awake in hospitals. He had cried tears that hurt more than any humiliation. You know what the problem with you people is? John said, looking at everyone there. You think expensive clothes make important people. And they don't. Margaret asked with irony. No. Character makes people important, and character can't be bought in stores. The phrase fell like a bomb in the middle of the dealership. For a few seconds, no one said anything, until Richard tried to regain control. Very pretty, Mr. Philosopher. But this isn't a place for moral lessons. This is a place of business. And I came to do business. What business? With what money? John took a black bank card from his pocket. Black card for transactions above 1 million. Richard looked, but pretended he didn't see. Cards can be faked too, he said, but his voice came out less confident. At that moment, 2 security guards entered the dealership. Big men, uniformed, who approached John with unfriendly faces. Is this the one? One of them asked Richard. Yes, he's been disturbing our clients for over an hour. John looked at the security guards. Simple men, workers, who probably earned minimum wage to protect rich people. People like himself, who battled every day to support their families. Sir, the security guard spoke to John. We're going to have to ask you to leave. I didn't do anything wrong, John replied calmly. We know, but you're causing discomfort. Discomfort why? For sitting. Sir, you know why? John stood up slowly. Not because he was leaving, but because he wanted to look those men in the eyes. Do you have children? The security guards looked at each other without understanding the question. Do you have children? John repeated. I do, one of them replied. I had one too, John said. And for the first time his voice trembled. An 8-year-old daughter, the most precious thing that ever existed in this world. The atmosphere became different. Even Margaret stopped laughing. She made me a promise before she left, John continued. And I came here to fulfill that promise. I won't leave until I succeed. What promise? The security guard asked, now with a softer voice. John looked around at Richard, Patricia, Margaret, everyone who had mocked him. A promise worth more than all the cars in this dealership combined. And he sat back down. The security guards looked at each other, not knowing what to do. It was difficult to forcibly remove a man who was there out of love for a daughter. The tension in the dealership was becoming unbearable, and John knew that soon everything would change. The truth always surfaces. Always. 2 hours passed. John continued sitting in that armchair as if he had roots. He didn't move, didn't complain, didn't make a scene, just waited with patience that irritated everyone. Richard paced back and forth, sweating cold, seeing important clients enter, look at that strange situation, and leave without buying anything. This is unbelievable, Margaret complained for the 10th time. I've never seen a dealership allow this type of situation. Patricia was desperate. The morning had been a complete disaster. 3 clients had already given up closing deals because of the inappropriate environment. Her phone wouldn't stop ringing. Other salespeople calling to know what was happening. Ricardo, she whispered, pulling the manager to a corner. Things are getting ugly. People from headquarters are already asking about the commotion. Someone posted photos on social media. Posted photos of what? Of the guy sitting in the armchair. There are already people commenting, asking if Mercedes became a homeless shelter. Richard felt his blood freeze. The dealership's reputation was being destroyed because of that stubborn farmer. What photo? Patricia showed her phone. A client had posted on Instagram. What an embarrassing situation at Mercedes. A homeless man has been occupying the store for hours, and no one does anything. The post already had 50 comments. People criticizing the dealership, others defending any person's right to enter a public store. The situation was going viral negatively. We need to get him out of there now, Richard said through gritted teeth. How? He hasn't done anything illegal, he's just sitting. Meanwhile, John observed everything in silence. He saw Richard's desperation, Patricia's nervousness, the client's irritation, but he also saw something deeper. He saw people who had lost their humanity amid so much luxury. People who forgot that behind every simple outfit exists a story. Sir, Richard approached once more, trying to control his anger. I'm going to make a proposal. You leave now, and I'll schedule a private meeting. How about that? No, John replied simply. What do you mean no? I no longer trust your word. The response was like a slap in Ricardo's face. Don't trust? Are you doubting my word? I am. You've already lied several times since I arrived here. Patricia interjected indignantly. We lied when you said Dr. Fernando doesn't see just anyone. That's a lie. Every customer has the right to speak with the person in charge. Not everyone is a customer, she retorted. I am. I came here to buy, not to ask for favors. An elegant couple who was looking at a Mercedes S-Class approached Richard, clearly uncomfortable. Manager, the man spoke quietly. What situation is this? My wife is embarrassed. Mr. Augustus, 1,000 apologies. We're already resolving it. Resolving how? The man has been there for hours. Is this normal? Richard looked at John with barely disguised hatred. That farmer was completely destroying his day, his reputation, maybe even his job. Mr. John, he tried one last card. You're hurting our business. You're making other people feel uncomfortable. That's not fair. John raised his eyes slowly. Fair? Do you think it's fair to treat me like trash just because of my clothes? No one treated you like trash. No. John smiled bitterly. You said I looked like a homeless person. You asked if I was going to pay with milk. You laughed in my face when I said I wanted to buy trucks. Isn't that treating someone like trash? The silence was embarrassing because it was true. All true. Look, Richard tried to justify himself. We need to be careful. There are a lot of con artists out there. People who come in here pretending to have money. And am I pretending? I don't know. How can I know? John took that black card from his pocket again. This time he extended it for Richard to take. Call the bank. Confirm the balance. Richard took the card, looked at it, but didn't call. Cards don't prove anything. They can be cloned. So what proves it? Official documents, proof of income, commercial references. I brought all of that. John pointed to the crumpled papers he had shown before. You didn't even look. Why? Because you already decided I was worthless before even hearing what I had to say. The truth hurt. Richard knew he had judged John by his appearance. Everyone knew, but they had gone too far to admit the mistake. At that moment, another client arrived. Dr. Henry Maurice, one of the city's biggest businessmen, owner of a supermarket chain. Rich, influential man who had been buying cars at the dealership for years. Richard, he greeted cheerfully. How are things, Dr. Henry? Good to see you. I came to see that Mercedes you showed me last week. Is it still available? Of course. Let's go there. But when they passed near John, Dr. Henry stopped, looked at that simple man sitting in the expensive armchair, and frowned. Who is this gentleman? He asked quietly. It's a situation we're resolving, Richard tried to disguise. Dr. Henry approached John. Good morning, sir. May I know what's happening here? John looked at him. He saw a well-dressed man, but different from the others. In his eyes there was no contempt. There was genuine curiosity. I came to buy trucks, John replied. I've been waiting to be served for over 2 hours. Trucks? How many? 15. Dr. Henry looked at Richard surprised. 15 Mercedes trucks. That's a big purchase. Why wasn't he served? Richard began to stutter. It's just that, well, we need to verify. These are procedures. Procedures for what? Do you have the documents, sir? I do, John confirmed. Then why weren't they analyzed? Richard didn't know what to answer. The situation was becoming increasingly embarrassing in front of an important client. Dr. Henry, Patricia tried to help. It's just that the situation is complex. Complex how? Sir, he addressed John again. He arrived here with those clothes talking about 15 trucks. It seemed unlikely. Dr. Henry looked at John again. He saw a simple man, but with dignity in his posture. He saw hands calloused from hard work. He saw in his eyes a deep sadness, but also iron determination. Sir, he addressed John. May I see your documents? John extended the crumpled papers. Dr. Henry took them and began to read. As he read, his expression changed. Bank statements with balances in the millions, export receipts to China and Europe, documents for 12 farms in 4 states. My God, he murmured. Richard, do you know who this man is? Who? John Silva, one of the largest rural producers in the country. Now I remember. I read about him in Forbes last month, but I didn't make the connection with you here, sir. The floor seemed to open under Richard's feet. Patricia went pale. Margaret stopped complaining and paid attention. Dr. Henry, Richard tried to save the situation. We didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to know, Dr. Henry replied dryly. You judged the man by the clothes he was wearing. John remained sitting, observing the change in everyone's behavior. He saw how people were capable of changing their attitude when they discovered they were wrong. But he didn't want respect because of money. He wanted respect for being human. Mr. John, Dr. Henry addressed him politely. I'm sorry for the treatment you received here. This doesn't represent the true Mercedes-Benz. Thank you, John replied simply. May I ask what you need 15 trucks for? John hesitated. The question touched the most painful wound. It's a long story. I have time. John looked around at Richard sweating cold, at nervous Patricia, at curious Margaret, at everyone who had mocked him. Maybe it was time to tell the truth. The truth about an 8-year-old girl who had changed his life forever. It's a promise I made to someone very special, he said, his voice trembling for the first time. Someone who's no longer here, but who continues living in my heart. Dr. Henry sensed the emotion in John's voice. An important promise. The most important of my life. And at that moment, John knew he was ready to tell the whole truth. The story that would make everyone there understand that they had judged not just a rich man, but a destroyed father trying to keep alive the memory of his daughter. The silence that took over the dealership was heavy as lead. Dr. Henry had John's documents in his hands, reading each line with growing attention. Richard was sweating cold, realizing he had made the most expensive mistake of his career. Patricia was biting her lip, trying to process what was happening. Mr. John, Dr. Henry said slowly. These numbers are impressive. 500,000 tons of soybeans per year. That's the current production, John confirmed. Next year should reach 600,000. And I export everything. 80% goes to China, the rest to Europe and the United States. Richard felt his legs wobble. He was watching the biggest sales opportunity of his life slip through his fingers like sand. 15 Mercedes trucks were more than $7 million in commission would be enough for him to buy a new house. Dr. Henry, he tried to interfere. I can explain. Explain what? Dr. Henry looked at him with barely disguised contempt. How you judged one of the country's biggest rural businessmen by the clothes he was wearing. We didn't know. You didn't know because you didn't want to know. You preferred to laugh in his face. Patricia tried to defend herself. Dr. Henry, you need to understand our position. Every day people show up here trying to scam us. And do you think every farmer is a scammer? It's not that. Then what is it? Pure prejudice. The word fell like a bomb in the middle of the dealership. Prejudice. That which no one wanted to admit, but which was stamped on every attitude since John arrived there. Margaret, who until then only complained, was now quiet in the corner, realizing she had associated herself with the wrong side of the story. Other clients who witnessed John's humiliation began to move away, embarrassed. Mr. John, Dr. Henry addressed him with genuine respect. Accept my apologies on behalf of all the clients of this dealership. The treatment you received was inadmissible. John nodded in silence. He wasn't interested in apologies. He was interested in fulfilling the promise he made to his daughter. Dr. Henry, he said, may I tell you why I need the 15 trucks? Of course. Feel free. John took a deep breath. He was going to tell the most painful story of his life to an audience that had spent hours humiliating him. But he felt it was necessary, that those people needed to understand what they had done. I had a daughter, he began, and his voice came out hoarser. Her name was Beatrice, the most beautiful thing God ever put in this world. The environment changed completely. Even Richard stopped moving. There was something in John's voice that captured everyone's attention. She was 8 years old. John continued, his eyes filling with tears. Curly hair, a smile that lit up the whole house, intelligent like no one. She dreamed of being a doctor. Dr. Henry moved closer, realizing he was hearing something very intimate. Beatrice was born with a heart problem, nothing that couldn't be solved with surgery, but she had to wait to grow a little more. The doctor said that at 10 years old, she could have the operation. Patricia felt a tightness in her chest. She had a daughter the same age. While she waited, she lived normally. She played, studied, helped me on the farm. She loved seeing the trucks loaded with soybeans leaving for the port. She asked where all that production was going. John stopped for a few seconds, trying to control his emotion. One day she asked me, Daddy, does our soy help feed people? I said yes. Then she said, how cool. So we help the world. That's how she thought, always thinking about helping. Richard lowered his head, beginning to understand that he had mocked a man carrying deep pain. 2 years ago, her heart began having problems earlier than expected. The doctors said we couldn't wait anymore. We had to operate urgently. John's voice failed. Dr. Henry placed his hand on his shoulder. The surgery was scheduled for a Monday in August 2024. Beatrice was excited. She said that after the operation, she would be able to run on the farm without getting tired. Tears began to flow down John's face. The night before, she called me to her room. She was scared, but trying to hide it. She asked me to sit on her bed. Patricia began to cry quietly. She was imagining her own daughter in that situation. She held my hand and said, "Daddy, if something happens to me, promise me something?" I said nothing would happen, that she would get better, but she insisted. "Promise, Daddy." "What did she ask?" Dr. Henry asked gently. John wiped his tears and looked at everyone there, at Richard, at Patricia, at Margaret, at everyone who had mocked him. She said, "Promise you'll help the poor little children who are sick like me? Promise you'll build a hospital for them." The silence was absolute. Even the street noises seemed to have stopped. "I promised," John said, his voice coming out as a whisper. "I promised I would help all the children who needed it." "And the surgery?" Dr. Henry asked, already knowing the answer. Beatrice didn't make it. Her little heart stopped on the operating table. Patricia broke down crying. Richard leaned against the wall, destroyed. Margaret covered her face with her hands. That story was breaking everyone's heart. "She died on a Monday morning," John continued. "But before leaving, she whispered in my ear, 'Don't forget the promise, Daddy. Help the little children.'" Dr. Henry was crying too. "And the trucks?" "The 15 trucks represent the 15 months she spent waiting for the surgery. Each truck will bear the name of a needy child who needs medical treatment." "How so?" "I'm going to use the trucks to expand the farm's production. All the extra profit will go toward building a free children's hospital. Beatrice Hospital." The revelation fell like lightning in the middle of the dealership. John wasn't there for business. He was there for love, for a promise made to a daughter who was gone. "That's why I need the most modern trucks," he explained. "I need to optimize transportation, increase production, generate more resources. Every extra dollar means one more child saved." Richard approached slowly, destroyed by guilt. "Mr. John, I didn't know." "How could you know?" John looked at him with deep sadness. "You didn't even give me a chance to explain." "Forgive me," Richard said. And for the first time in his life, he was truly apologizing. "It's not to me you should apologize," John replied. "It's to Beatrice. You laughed at her dream." Patricia approached, crying. "Mr. John, I have a daughter the same age yours was. I can't imagine." "Then imagine," John interrupted her. "Imagine your daughter asking you to help other children, and imagine arriving somewhere to fulfill that promise and being treated like trash." The words were like stabs to everyone's heart. They had humiliated a grieving father. They had mocked a sacred mission. "I came here," John continued, "because I read that this dealership supports social projects. I thought you would understand my cause." Dr. Henry shook his head indignantly. "Mr. John, what happened here today is inadmissible. I'm going to speak personally with Dr. Fernando." "Where is he?" "He should be arriving. He always comes at 3 p.m. John looked at his watch. It was 2:50. After almost 4 hours of waiting, he was finally going to be able to speak with someone who could resolve his situation. "Mr. John," Richard approached again, his voice choked with emotion. "If you'll allow me, I want to help with the hospital project." "How?" "I'll give up my commission on the truck sale. All the money will go to Beatrice Hospital." Patricia joined him. "I'll also give up my share." John looked at both of them. He saw genuine remorse in their eyes, saw people who had understood the magnitude of the mistake they had made. Beatrice would be happy," he said simply. At that moment, the dealership door opened and an elegant man entered, about 60 years old, gray hair, with the presence of someone who commands. It was Dr. Fernando, the dealership owner. He stopped at the entrance, seeing that heavy atmosphere, people crying, attention you could cut with a knife. "What's happening here?" he asked. Dr. Henry approached him. "Fernando, I need to talk to you." "Urgent." "About what?" "About how your employees treated the biggest potential client who ever set foot in this dealership." Dr. Fernando looked around and saw John sitting in that armchair with the face of someone who had gone through much suffering. "Who is this gentleman?" "John Silva. And he has a story to tell that will change everything you think about customer service." John stood up slowly. Finally, he was going to get what he came for. But now it wasn't about trucks anymore. It was about justice. Justice for Beatrice. Dr. Fernando looked around the dealership, and felt that something very serious had happened there. The atmosphere was charged, employees with funeral faces, embarrassed clients, and that simple man standing in the middle of it all, with a dignity that cut to the soul. "Henry, explain to me exactly what happened," he said, pulling his friend aside. "Fernando, you won't believe this. This gentleman arrived here 4 hours ago wanting to buy 15 Mercedes trucks, and your employees treated him like he was a beggar." 15 trucks. Dr. Fernando's eyes widened. "That's more than $7 million. Exactly. And look at his documents." Dr. Fernando took the crumpled papers John had brought. As he read, his expression changed completely. These weren't ordinary documents. They were proof of a rural empire that few knew about. "My God in heaven," he murmured. 12 farms in 4 states. Exports to 3 continents. This man is John Silva. Have you heard of him? Dr. Fernando almost fainted. John Silva. The John Silva of Silva Agribusiness. This man is worth more than $200 million. He's one of the biggest rural producers in America. The information exploded like a bomb in Dr. Fernando's head. Richard, who was listening to the conversation from afar, felt his legs give way. Patricia leaned against a Mercedes to keep from falling. Dr. Fernando approached John with quick steps, his face red with shame. "Mr. John Silva, I'm Fernando Andrade, owner of this dealership." John turned slowly. "Pleasure, Dr. Fernando. The pleasure is mine, and I want to ask 1,000 apologies for the inadmissible treatment you received here today." "Thank you. Mr. John, may I know exactly what happened?" John looked at Richard and Patricia, who were pale as paper. "I arrived here at 9 a.m., wanting to buy 15 Mercedes trucks. I was treated as if I were homeless, trying to pull a scam." "How so?" "They laughed at me, said I looked like a homeless person, asked if I was going to pay with milk and eggs, doubted that I could read and write." Dr. Fernando turned purple with rage, turned to Richard with eyes of fire. "Is this true?" Richard tried to speak, but the words wouldn't come out. He was destroyed by the magnitude of the mistake he had made. "Answer me," Dr. Fernando shouted. Yes, it's true," Richard stammered. "But we didn't know who he was." "You didn't know? And that justifies treating any person with disrespect." "No, sir." "Do you know who John Silva is?" Dr. Fernando exploded. "One of Mercedes' biggest clients in America. He buys tractors, implements, equipment. He's already moved more than $50 million with our brand." Patricia broke down crying. She realized she had destroyed her career through pure prejudice. "But worse than that," Dr. Fernando continued, "you humiliated a man who's going through the most difficult moment of his life." "How so?" Richard asked, confused. Dr. Henry approached. "Fernando, let me tell you. Mr. John lost his daughter last year, an 8-year-old girl." Dr. Fernando stopped shouting. He looked at John with a completely different expression. "Mr. John, she had a heart problem," John said simply. "She didn't survive the surgery. I'm truly sorry." "Thank you. But that's not what I came to talk about." "Then what?" John took a deep breath. "My daughter made me promise I would help other sick children. I came to buy the 15 trucks to expand production and build a free children's hospital." Dr. Fernando was speechless. The information was too heavy to process all at once. "A hospital, and a Beatrice hospital, in memory of my daughter. And the trucks will optimize soybean transportation. Every extra dollar of profit goes to the hospital. 15 trucks represent 15 months she spent waiting for surgery." Dr. Fernando turned to Richard and Patricia with controlled fury. "You laughed at a man who wants to build a hospital for children?" "We didn't know." Patricia tried to explain through tears. "You didn't know because you judged by appearance. Because you thought farmers can't have money." "Dr. Fernando," John intervened. "You don't need to yell at them. They already understand their mistake." "Mr. John, this is inadmissible. As the owner, I take full responsibility for what happened. It's past. Now I want to focus on what I came to do here." Dr. Fernando nodded. "Of course. The 15 trucks. Which model specifically?" "Mercedes Actros 2551 6x4 with all available implements. Listed price, $7,400,000. I can do it for $7 million even. You don't need a discount. I want to pay the fair price." "Mr. John, after what happened here, it's the least I can do." John shook his head. "Dr. Fernando, discounts don't erase humiliation, but new attitudes do." "Yes. What attitude?" Teach your employees that money doesn't walk around stuck to clothes. Teach them that every customer deserves respect, regardless of how they're dressed. Dr. Fernando looked at Richard and Patricia. Did you hear that? Yes, sir. Both replied in unison. From today on, any employee who judges a customer by appearance will be fired immediately. Understood. Understood, Richard said, still devastated. Dr. Fernando turned to John again. Mr. John, besides the trucks, I'd like to make a proposal. What proposal? Mercedes-Benz wants to be an official partner of Anna Beatrice Hospital. We'll donate 1% of our entire annual revenue to the project. John was surprised. That's very generous. It's what your daughter deserved. A tribute worthy of her dream. Tears flowed down John's face. Anna Beatrice would be very happy. Margaret, who had been quiet all this time, approached embarrassed. Mr. John, I also want to apologize. I was cruel to you. Forget about it. I can't forget. I also want to help with the hospital. My husband is a senator. We can facilitate licenses and authorizations. John nodded gratefully. All help is welcome. Dr. Fernando took a tablet and began configuring the sale. Mr. John, when do you want to receive the trucks? As soon as possible. Every day that passes is a child who might need help. I understand. I can deliver all 15 trucks in 1 week, all customized with the hospital's name. Perfect. Richard approached hesitantly. Mr. John, may I say something? Go ahead. You taught me the most important lesson of my life today. I'll never judge anyone by appearance again. I hope that's true. It is, and I want to prove it. I'm giving up my salary for the next 6 months to donate to the hospital. Patricia joined in. I also want to help honor Anna Beatrice's memory. John looked at both of them, saw sincere remorse, saw people who had learned a lesson they would carry for life. Anna Beatrice always said people can change, he said. You're proving she was right. Dr. Fernando finished configuring the purchase. Done, Mr. John. $7 million, cash payment. Delivery in 1 week. John took the black card and handed it to him. You can process it. The transaction was approved in seconds. $7 million transferred instantly. The biggest sale in the dealership's history had been completed. Mr. John, Dr. Fernando said solemnly, it's an honor to do business with you, and an even greater honor to participate in Anna Beatrice's dream. John smiled for the first time that day. She's watching everything from up there. She must be happy, knowing that 15 trucks will help save other children. She certainly is, Dr. Henry completed. And she must be proud of the father she has. John took his hat and put it on his head. Dr. Fernando, thank you for your attention. The trucks will make a difference in many families' lives. May the children who will be saved at Anna Beatrice Hospital know that it all started here with the courage of a father who didn't give up on a promise. John waved to everyone and headed to the door, but before leaving, he turned one last time. Folks, always remember, character isn't worn, it's carried. And he left that dealership as he entered. Simple, dignified, but now respected by everyone who witnessed the greatest life lesson they had ever experienced. 6 months later, John stood in front of a building that seemed to have come out of a dream. Anna Beatrice Hospital gleamed under the morning sun, with 5 floors of pure love transformed into concrete and hope. The golden plaque at the entrance bore the photo of an 8-year-old girl, smiling as if she were still alive to see the miracle happening. Daddy, we did it, he whispered, looking at his daughter's photo. We did it, my princess. The 15 Mercedes trucks were lined up at the hospital entrance, all immaculate, each bearing the name of a needy child who had already been saved inside. Anna Beatrice 01, Anna Beatrice 02, up to Anna Beatrice 15. Each truck represented not just a vehicle, but lives that would continue to be transformed. Dr. Fernando arrived with his whole family, wife, children, grandchildren, all wanting to see the hospital that had been born from a promise made on a painful hospital dawn. Mr. John, he said emotionally, I never thought I'd see something so beautiful in my life. Anna Beatrice planned everything, John replied, adjusting a white flower wreath he brought for his daughter. I just executed her dream. Richard arrived soon after, but he wasn't alone. He brought his entire family and 20 more dealership employees, all dressed simply, without that arrogance from before. 6 months working as a volunteer at the hospital had completely changed his perspective on life. Mr. John, he approached with shining eyes. There's a surprise for you. What surprise? Today's first surgery, an 8-year-old girl, same problem Anna Beatrice had. Her heart will be operated on by the best pediatric cardiologist in the country. John felt his chest tighten. What's her name? Isabella. And do you know what she asked her mother last night? What? She asked to meet Anna Beatrice's daddy. Said she wants to thank him for building the hospital. Tears flowed down John's face. It was as if Anna Beatrice was sending a sign from heaven. Patricia approached too, bringing her daughter by the hand. An 8-year-old girl, lively, who looked at everything with curiosity. Mr. John, Patricia said, "This is my daughter Julia. She wanted to meet you." The girl let go of her mother's hand and ran to John. "Uncle John, Mommy told me about Anna Beatrice." John knelt to be at her height. "She did. She told me she was an angel who asked you to help the little children. Is it true?" "It's true." "Then she's my friend, because I also want to help the little children." John hugged Julia, feeling his heart warm. It was as if Anna Beatrice were there speaking through that child. As the day progressed, hundreds of people visited the hospital. Healed children, grateful parents, emotional staff. The story of Anna Beatrice and her father's promise had spread throughout the state. "Mr. John," Dr. Fernando said at the end of the day, "do you know how many children have already been treated here in 6 months?" "How many?" 3,500, 500 surgeries performed, all successful. 500 Anna Beatrices saved, John murmured emotionally. "And this is just the beginning. With the expansion we're planning, we'll reach 1,000 surgeries per month." The sun was setting when John looked one last time at his daughter's photo at the hospital entrance. "Anna Beatrice," he whispered. "Mission accomplished, at least for today." And that night, while returning to the farm, John knew he had done the right thing. The 15 Mercedes trucks weren't just vehicles. They were symbols of a kept promise, of a love that doesn't end, of a lesson that teaches. Never judge someone by their appearance, because you might be despising an angel in disguise. The story of the humiliated farmer who became a hero had spread throughout the country. But for John, the most important thing wasn't fame. It was knowing that somewhere in heaven, an 8-year-old girl was smiling, seeing her daddy transform pain into hope. And whenever a child was saved at Anna Beatrice Hospital, John whispered, "One more, my daughter. One more life you saved." Because true love doesn't end when someone leaves. It continues through the promises we keep and the lives